80% fossil fuels and 12% renewable energy and other sources, is what I read on one website. But,
Yeah, so here's a few, so I'll just back up and get you back into Shramsky here.
for sure, yeah.
So this is big picture. And so there's some big numbers here. So the one big number I'm throwing at you is 2 zetajoules. That's basically the number of joules, that's the amount of energy that's converted from radiation into chemical energy via photosynthesis.
Now I see what you're saying.
Right, so first law of thermodynamics, you cannot create or destroy energy. It's got to go somewhere. Another number to keep in mind, and I'll go ahead and type these out. These are some numbers to keep in mind. So if we look at 2 zetajoules, that is that's basically annual radiation to chemical, right? And 500 exajoules, which equals 0.5 zetajoules, is technology into, you name it, electricity, heat, everything we do with our yeah. Ultimately, it goes into heat plus greenhouse gases, and that's kind of the ultimate fate of energy. And you mentioned the fact that a large fraction of our energy comes from fossil fuel. And I would suggest, in addition to Shramsky, using ruler meters. And this is something we do in Energy 101. We pop out here and take a look at this guy, and they do have the numbers. And let's just hop right out to energy. So here's energy used today. And so you can see the lion's share. This number goes up all the time. I mean, it really does. Couple of things to keep in mind here, Ethan, just while we're thinking about it. So in 2016,
Yes.
there were 14 gigawatts of solar PV installed. In 2015, this is right, and you saw these two, right, Tim? 7 gigawatts solar PV installed. So anything that doubles in 1 year, like if you were following the stock market, I double my, this is something you would follow.
Originally, I have an economics and finance major, so that actually goes.
Yeah, so you get it. So this doubled.
The math of it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
The
So
theory is what I really need to understand.
right. So you can kind of look at these two guys.
Actually, if you click back on that for a second, Brad.
Yeah.
Look at that biggest number down there.
Solar
energy striking the
Yeah.
compared to what
Potential energy we
using.
could be using.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yeah. So that another number to keep in mind is that the ratio, it's 10,000 to 1. So this is solar, incident solar to what we call it, just technological use or human consumption or human. I'm going to call it technological consumption. Okay, and so I'm going to put this. I'm going to put this down here because this up here is energy. This down here is power. And another thing to keep in mind, I'll throw just a little bit of math at you, is that energy equals power times time. And so you can sort of have that energy. So think of it this way. You go and fill your car up, you just put energy into the car. Now, if you drive around very quickly, you're doing so very powerfully, and you're not going to have as much time to burn the gasoline. Or you could drive around slowly, and you're going to have more time to go through it. So that's the relationship. So
It's like driving a manual car and driving on the clutch. If you're riding the clutch, you're not using gas.
right. Well, right. You could think of it idling with the car out of gear, and in general, there are ways. and that's why this, we're starting to see more of these hybrids, because you can be sitting at the stoplight and the whole thing's off, right? The engine's not running, the motor's not running, you're just there getting, well, infinite miles per gallon because you're not burning anything. Right. Okay, so up here's energy. Down here is power. Down here's power. So if we get back to Shramsky, what he's trying to show is that all of the coal, all the gas, all of the oil, that was, it didn't just, it wasn't here at the beginning when the Earth formed. It was only here, as a result of photosynthesis, as a result of life. Okay, so the point is we're draining, and then the other thing to keep in mind, Ethan, another thing to keep in mind is that right now, there's another ratio that's kind of weird to think about, and we do this on the first week of class, but 10 million to 1 is the carbon sequestration or carbon formation.
What exactly do you mean by that? Is that like how much carbon is emitted into the air? Or?
This is the other way around. So every time photosynthesis happens, carbon is sucked out of the air.
Okay.
And, so when the plant or the tree does that, now the carbon has gone from a gas form into a solid form, and is now goes down to the ground. Yeah, and exactly the opposite happens. I mean, the opposite thing is happening right now as our bodies consume oxygen. We emit the carbon dioxide. Same thing happens in technology. So, and the reason I use this 10 million to 1 ratio is that if we assume that photosynthesis started about 3 billion years ago, these numbers, if we go back to PV, you can say, so if there are, at the current rate, and this number changes all the time, so as we slow down our rate of oil consumption, this number goes up. If somebody goes and discovers a whole bunch more oil, the number goes up. If we accelerate our use, it goes down. So this 46 years,
Fluctuates.
it does, but it's on the order of 300, right? Because we've been burning oil pretty gangbusters for about 150, and so this is what nature put in the bank. Nature bank to human consumption ratio. So that's where I get that 10 million to 1 ratio.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, okay. So that's something we crank out. So the same thing, here's days at the end of natural gas. We run that math. Let's see, let's do 60,000 divided by 365 equals 164 years. So it actually comes out right about on target with the fact that, okay, we've been burning for about 150, and we got about 150 left.
About 150 years left, yeah. Give or take those,
Right.
those
Right.
will
Yeah.
change.
So that's kind of the big picture. So, and to get back, I mean, all of this, carbon battery was put there by, all that great solar energy.
Solar.
Yeah.
So it's a natural thing.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And obviously not every photon hits a leaf out there. I mean, some just
yeah.
bounces everywhere. And even a plant is just a few percent efficient on doing photosynthesis. So.
What they don't throw out there for numbers right now too is not necessarily on here. The sunlight hitting the earth in 1 hour would meet 100% of all mankind's power energy needs for a year.
Exactly, yeah.
If you can capture it.
Yeah, so that's that's this right here, what Tim just said. So 1 hour, so this is one year to 1 hour. And we can do that math, right? So So the energy that hits the earth from the sun in 1 hour would power civilization for 1 year. If we captured it all.
Yeah, if you capture it on your able to.
Yeah.
See, what I've been doing a lot of, what I've seen a lot of the research is, at least a lot of the problem with switching over is, a lot of the people just don't want to pay the more money up front and
Yeah.
pay less in the future.
Yeah.
And they want to pay less now and more in the future.
Yeah.
This is what I've been seeing in the research, but I mean, it
Yeah.
just doesn't make any sense, because once you see these numbers, you're right, it opens up a big picture for you.
Yeah, yeah. I've got to take a phone call. Do you have 10 or 15 more minutes to hang with these?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
And this tape is running, so
Okay.
well, you're not going to publish it, right? You're
No,
gonna put it
no,
on-
I'm gonna use it in-
Put it on Late Night with Colbert. So Tim, maybe if you pop over here, I just got to make a couple little.
Thank you.
My pleasure, yeah, and Tim Chester was one of my top grads a couple years ago, and so he knows.
Solar's kind of my baby nowadays.
Yeah. So the other thing he's trying to look at, Tim, is just like the pros and cons of like solar versus coal.
Okay.
So what I just tried to show is like, well, coal came from solar originally, but here we are now, why don't we get more of our electricity straight up from solar and PV versus.
Right.
So just help yourself with the machine there.
All right. So technically, that's kind of the fun part about it, that I like bringing up to classes when I go out and teach this to, middle school, high school kids, is technically coal is solar energy. It's 3 billion year old solar energy. But ultimately, any of our hydrocarbons, any of our fossil fuels, at one time, got their energy from the sun. So it's all solar energy. The difference is that it's condensed.
And the way it's processed and the way it's in the
Correct.
is the part that really changes it.
Correct. Whereas we have our solar panels, if I have a photovoltaic panel on the roof, it's taking energy directly from the sun and making it into usable electricity.
So that was actually what I was talking to him about before you actually popped in. I'll tell you about that. So what got me onto the subject in the first place was the Powerwall batteries that Elon Musk
Right.
recently unveiled, and how, it's the wall-mounted battery. You put a certain amount of, solar panels on your roof, whatever the statistic is. And, it acts as, of course, like a battery. And I thought that was just a really cool idea, so I started doing a lot more research on that.
Right.
Specifically, and so recent technology, and with that was it's just it's dumbfounding how they wouldn't change or anything like that.
You run into a couple issues. You talk about economics. Economics change every day. And today, we are more economical to put solar on a roof than we were yesterday. If you think about the average size of solar array that we put on a house now is about 4 kilowatts. That'll run your average 3-bedroom, 2,000 square foot house, and pretty much meet 100% of their energy needs. 20 years ago, that system would cost you well over $100,000.
So they've greatly reduced it, though.
Oh, absolutely. That same system today, to have somebody install it, professionally installed, is about $10,000 to $12,000. So it's 1/10 of the price. The problem with that is the price has not really changed that much on electricity. Electricity's gone up a little bit in cost, but not very much. So 20 years ago, you may have been paying 6 cents per kilowatt hour, and your system lasts for 25 years, if you're lucky, and everything works like it's supposed to. Nowadays, they actually do, but back then, not so much. The payoff on a system that costs $100,000 might be 50 or 60 years, but it's only designed to last 25 years. The difference nowadays with the price down there at, I think installed is right around $3 per kilowatt hour. You're looking at a payback of about 10 years on a system that lasts 25 years. So you'll actually make money on it, but 20 years ago you couldn't. That's why you're seeing the huge increase. So it makes sense of, well, okay, then why don't we have that same system on every single house? And wouldn't that answer our problem? And that battery wall brings up exactly what the problem is. How do I store it? At 2 o'clock in the morning when I want to turn on the bathroom light,
Without the sun.
Without any
What is
sun,
that catalyst gonna do?
where's that gonna come from?
Which is interesting because you said to install that would be 10 to 12,000. So is that just the solar panel part of it?
No, that's everything.
That would be everything?
Yep.
That's interesting, because I'll have to look back on it, but so the battery I know itself, the Powerwall is like 4 grand, but I guess that would also not include the setup of the solar panels.
Correct.
See, that's where I wasn't thinking, because I was thinking that would be conjoined on that.
Right. Now, a couple problems that you run into, and we'll talk about storage of it. Batteries. Batteries have a definite lifespan. Typical lead acid battery, like you have in your car, use a similar system for storage of solar power, but larger and more dense. So it's more heavy metals, more lead plates, more battery acid, more plastic in the casing and everything. If I have those inside my house, so they stay at a good temperature where they never get too hot, they never get too cold. I check the fluid in them every 3 months. They are on a recirc system that shocks them every, or a desulfation program that once a month desulfates the batteries. Everything you can possibly do to maximize the life of them. 6 years is about what you get out of a battery.
Okay.
Typical house that we just talked about, 4 kilowatts, would have anywhere from 18 to 36 of those batteries. They cost $100 a piece.
Okay, so you're looking at like
Thousands of dollars in batteries. They're only good for 6 years. Plus all the toxic chemicals that are involved in that, right? If you start looking at stuff like the battery wall, it's more compact. It's not as big. It doesn't take up as much space. Those tend to use exotic chemicals. And I just read somewhere, I don't know where it was, but Tesla, Elon Musk, those guys are using about 80% of those specialty heavy metals in the world on those batteries. And those are very finite. Those are not like, lead is a fairly common element. The stuff that they're using is not.
So that becomes a huge issue at that point, because you could only make really a set amount of those batteries then. With
Right.
the resources at hand, unless you revolutionize the technology.
Right, and that's not something that we can make. Right now, lead acid is the king, that's what we have. And it's what we have enough materials to make. There are enough natural resources to make those. But break that down and think about it. Let's say we had a town the size of Frenchtown. I'm guessing Frenchtown or Bonner, they have, I'm just going to use a town of 1,000 residents, right? So let's say in that 1,000 residents, there are 400 homes. So there's 400 homes in that town. Each one of those has a minimum of 18 batteries. How many batteries is that just for that one town?
That's like
A bunch.
that's
180,000.
180,000
Let's break it down, let's take it even smaller so we can keep our numbers
Still in
simple.
South Dakota.
There's 100 houses in a town. That's 1,800 batteries at $100 a piece. And they're only good for 6 years. But so 1,800 batteries, I'm gonna need 5 battery changes during the lifetime of my solar array for those. And all of a sudden now I'm, what's 5 times 18? We're 90,000?
Yeah.
So I need, or I'm sorry, 9,000. So I need 9,000 batteries just for a city of 100 homes. And start combining that across the whole United States. You can see where, okay, lead acid batteries are not gonna do it.
Innovation is exactly what it's the thing, I guess.
So now you can see the problem, the grid, which, most 99% of the solar being installed right now is grid connected. And you're dumping that electricity into the grid, which is great because it actually times out just about right that our highest electricity demand on the grid is the same time as the sun is shining. We don't need much electricity at 2 a.m. other than the people getting up to go to the bathroom. or the furnace kicking on, or something like that. But that number is greatly reduced compared to everybody at the shopping mall. All the factories that are up and running and using electricity. So those numbers are greatly reduced during that time. Excuse me. That's great. But think of the grid as a 5-gallon bucket with water. And you have to keep it exactly level with the top. If I put in too much electricity, it overflows, that's bad. If I don't put in enough electricity or enough water, it's low, and there's not enough water to do what I need to do. Electricity works the same way, and the grid has this constant balance all the time that it has to meet exactly the demand. And they can do that with a generator or wind turbines. There's a lot of different ways for them to do that, to keep that bucket exactly level. Keep that electricity exactly the right amount. And now all of a sudden you go out and you put 4 kilowatts on your roof. And you're like, oh, hey, here's some more water. And they're like, oh crap, now I gotta adjust.
Now you have to adjust to the more.
And that's one person doing it, and one person doing it, or even 10 houses in a grid the size of Missoula, it's not really a big deal.
But if it would be more
But,
and more.
yeah, the more and more, if I put them on every single house, now I have, in Missoula, I've got 20,000 homes all dumping water into that bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't need any more water.
It has to stay at that level.
So, it seriously messes with the grid. And we got to figure out how are we going to manage that. Now, wind and hydroelectric are both great because they're instant on and off for demand. If I need more electricity, I just open the valve a little bit wider on the hydroelectric dam, it makes more electricity, it puts more electricity in the system. If I need less, I just crank down that valve a little bit, it makes a little bit less electricity. Wind turbines, I just flip the switch and turn it off, it's not making any, and when I need it again, I can flip that switch back on and boom, it's making electricity again, as long as the wind's blowing. So some of the other technologies, and solar is the same way. I mean, you can very easily control solar as far as its output during the times where the sun is shining. But how do I control that input on somebody's house? I can't. I don't have any control of that system. So I have to adapt my system to keep the bucket from overflowing because I have no control over what they are doing and what they're putting into the system.
Yeah.
And then you run into a problem of, okay, well, we have smart meters and we can turn stuff on and off, but, I'm putting in 4 kilowatts, and my neighbor's putting in 4 kilowatts, and the next guy's putting in 4 kilowatts. Ultimately, all together, we're putting in 100 kilowatts. The power company only needs 50 kilowatts. So they're going to turn off half the homes. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not getting credit for my solar. How's come that guy's getting credit for it and I'm not getting credit for mine? So there's a reason why they can't control it, and we don't really want them to, but that's a huge problem is the grid and how that works. So we've already talked a little bit about storage and how batteries don't work. But if you look up the definition of a battery and what is a battery, it's a way to store energy. We think of a AA battery or a 12-volt car battery.
Finite. It's finite.
But really, a battery is any method to store energy. And it's not specified that it has to be stored. Energy can be stored in other ways. And probably the biggest one right now that we're looking at as a potential is pump storage. So we did the math on a couple of years ago. If we had a tank up on top of Mount Sentinel that was about the size of the Lomason Library, right? I don't know how many cubic feet. We did the math at one time.
10,000, maybe more.
Well, easily, yeah. If we had a tank the size of that library up on top of the mountain, and every day during the 4 hours, 5 hours of peak sun when the sun was really shining, we could run pumps and fill that tank with water up there. And then the rest of the day, we just run off of that hydroelectricity by reversing the flow and just using the gravity to let it create hydroelectric power.
That was actually what I also read a little bit about that. That was something that was really confusing to understand, but I see what you're saying now. So hydroelectric is the same as solar, but it's just a different way of using it, I guess, or
It's like
synthesizing.
solar electricity is either on or off. It's just making electricity.
Okay.
There is no storage in that system. It's either making it or it's not.
Yeah.
What you're doing when you pump that up to the top of Mount Sentinel or in any hydroelectric is you have potential energy. And that energy is stored until you harness that energy. So all that water sitting up there, it's not doing anything. There's no electrical charge to it or anything else. It's just water sitting up there on top of the mountain. Gravity gives it that potential energy. So it has a certain amount of fall, and when it hits the turbine, it transfers that gravitational energy. We harness that to create
Our energy.
our energy into electricity.
That makes a lot of sense.
So there's a lot of different methods for doing that. They've looked at wind energy is probably more so than solar. Solar is very dependable, and we can count on it every day, right? We know that the sun's going to come up every morning for the most part. And if we don't, we've got bigger issues in electricity, so we don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But it's a low density energy, that meaning I need a huge area of solar panels to capture the same amount of energy that I can capture with one wind turbine.
Or one huge tank.
Right.
Yeah.
So quantities wise, the energy density of solar is so low that it has a huge footprint. And I might need 20 acres of solar panels or 30 acres of solar panels to equal one wind turbine, which uses less than an acre, for that footprint. So because of the energy density, they're looking at a lot of these ideas like pump storage work better with a wind turbine than they do with a solar panel. And they just built one in Iowa, which just so happens that the stars aligned. The wind conditions are great in western Iowa for a wind farm. And they purposely shopped around for land doing geological research. They found a giant limestone dome underneath. I don't know how many 100 feet down it is, but there's this giant dome. And what they're doing is they hook that up to the grid, and it's right next to Interstate 80 going across Iowa. It runs, dumps into the grid, when the wind's blowing. And if the grid's full and they don't need it, out here at Judith Gap, they turn off the wind turbine. They're like, oh, don't do anything with it. Well, there they have that option of pump storage. They use that same, they don't turn off the wind turbine, they just use it to run a compressor instead.
And store the extra energy.
And they compress air inside that limestone dome. And they've got, this thing's huge. It's probably the size of Missoula or bigger. So they have all these compressors running, and these wind turbines run continuously as long as the wind's blowing, and they're either creating electricity for the grid or going down to that dome and pressurizing it. Wind's not blowing, the grid still needs electricity. They can reverse the flow. That compressed air now has energy, and they can use that energy to convert it into electricity to put back into the grid. So, and it would be at another form of a battery, but it's a compressed air battery. Or we have a water battery, pump storage.
That pump storage is really cool. I've never really heard anything about that pump storage.
So there's a lot of different ways to do this that we're studying, we're working with. A friend of mine just sent me something the other night on Facebook of iron ferrite batteries, non-toxic. It's just salt water and iron ferrite. Doesn't really do anything.
And it doesn't.
But the difference is he showed me a house that had a basement or a crawl space that was full of these big 4x4 cubes, and each one of those was a battery. And each one of those was about the equivalent of a little car battery. Now, again, we're talking energy density and how dense is the energy. The technology is great because there's no, hazardous chemicals or anything in it, but at the same time, it's, 50 times or 100 times larger than what that battery is. So I could have a battery bank that's literally the size of this desk with lead acid batteries that would power my entire house. By using those iron saltwater batteries, I fill up an entire 30 by 50 foot basement with those pallets of batteries to do the same thing that I can in this size of this table. So energy storage, when it comes right down to it, coal is convenient, gasoline is convenient. The reason we're not breaking away from all these is convenience.
Very convenience. I see what you're saying. I was going to say, you've literally answered you and him alone have answered all those questions besides two, which I'll just ask. Is this thing still recording, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh, it's saying is, do you think you mind sending that to me?
No, he'll send it to you, absolutely.
Perfect. Because there's two more questions I have, and then
Okay.
I'd still be willing to listen for a little bit longer. But do you think in our lifetime we will make the switch over to even more than 30% of solar energy being used, or like 30% of our energy being used as solar energy, or do you think that's pretty not going to happen?
I hate to sound pessimistic about it. In our current state of affairs, no, we will not.
For the sake of convenience.
Without something catastrophic happening, no, we will not. Because if you look at just what's happened here in Montana in the Senate in the past 2 weeks, a whole bunch of energy bills came up in the Senate for them to vote on. We had, I want to say there was over 500 people, and I know there was in person, and there were over 5,000 signatures from Montana supporting a new solar energy initiative that removes some of the restrictions on net metering to allow us, right now the limit is 50 kilowatts in Montana is the biggest system you can put up. And they wanted to up that up to 300 kilowatts. And that is across the board for anybody except a utility company. So if you look at the Forest Service out at the airport, they have a 50 kilowatt array. They have some huge buildings out there. Their use is more than 50 kilowatts. My house, if I use, it would be crazy if I put 50 kilowatts on my house. It's way more than I need, right? And I can see that messing with the grid. But the Forest Service and all those big buildings, that's only a very tiny percentage of their energy usage. And what they'd like to do is build a big enough system to be able to power their buildings and get closer to zero. And like I said, we had several hundred people there in person at the Senate. Northwest Energy sent one lobbyist. Guess who won? Even though the entire Senate floor was just covered with all these people waving signs and chanting and cheering, the one lobbyist from Northwest Energy for Senate Bill 78. And guess what? We lost.
Wow.
Because of that one lobbyist. So that's the reason I say, no, in your lifetime you're not going to see it unless something changes, because the laws are written by the utility companies for the utility companies.
That actually cycles into my next question, which is kind of a no-brainer, but do you think Trump's administration is going to help this in any way, solar energy?
I don't think any politician is going to help any, no. Because the problem is within our structure and how our structure is set up.
Money.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who the president is. The money, the laws are written by.
Yeah, but the other thing is, we've reached a point now where solar has reached what's called grid parity.
Mm-hmm.
And the coal companies didn't go belly up because of whatever, or the Clean Oil or the Clean Air Act. It's natural gas actually took them out. The cheap price of natural gas as a result of fracking was actually what really damaged.
And because it's clean compared to coal.
Yeah. It's so it's cheaper and cleaner. So they kind of couple nuts cracked there. Yeah.
So what you'll see with Northwest Energy right now, they're doing a lot of wrangling with solar. But if you think about it, Wally's actually got the perfect cartoon for that. They're like, oh, you want to use oil? Sure, we've got oil, we'll sell it to you. Oh, you want to use coal? Sure, we've got coal, we'll sell it to you. You want to use solar? Sure, we've got solar, we'll sell, oh, wait a minute.
We don't own the
We
sun.
don't own that, so no, it doesn't work. And that's ultimately what it is. Northwest Energy is spending a lot of money on solar, and they're putting up a lot of solar. But don't think for a minute that Northwest Energy is out to save the planet, or Northwest Energy wants you to go out and put solar on your roof to save the planet. They're in business to make money, period. And where they're at is they're getting their foot in the door so they have control over solar versus coal.
Yeah, and here's one other little story for you. And so we've met some of the lobbyists per se. And so there's a guy by the name of Tyler Crutchfield who I actually met through a solar installer. And so Crutchfield is one of these guys that will trade, dollars versus yen. So and you said you're an economics business guy. And so, so like if I walked up to you right now and said, hey, here's a yen, I want to buy your whatever pencil. I don't want a yen. There's no value in that for me. So the currencies have values based on where you are in time and space, right? So there's always some deficit. I'll trade this. So that's what kind of keeps the economy running. Crutchfield also, as soon as these mandates started coming down, we're going to shut down Colstrip, shut down Arden, he sort of appointed himself as the energy ambassador of Montana to Seattle, PP&L, to the state of Washington, because he's got the money locked up in the coal plant. It's the same way. So if you want to go in and put a new whatever energy installation, doesn't matter what kind it is, someone's got to put that money up front. They want their money back, right? Where do you get the money back? Well, a lot of it comes from the ratepayer. So as long as you're buying the electricity from that firm, it'll come back. Well, he came out and says, no, you gotta keep that on.
So one more story for you that'll kind of throw that along the same lines. You're familiar with Judith Gap Wind Farm out east of White Sulphur Springs, little ways. They built that wind farm in 2007. There's 97 wind turbines out there. At the time, all the hydroelectric dams were just kind of scattered different owners for all the hydroelectric dams in Montana. If you were watching the news a couple of years ago, they had new laws that came out, part of the green energy laws, saying this year, 2013 or whatever it was, and I don't know don't quote me on the dates, but you have to use 5% of your electricity for utility companies has to come from renewable energy. And then in 2014, 10% has to come, all the way up to now we're at 15%. It has to come from renewable energy, which is wind, solar, hydroelectric, geothermal. Pretty much those four are the big ones. That's your requirement. At the same time, 2013, Northwest Energy bought all 9 hydroelectric dams in Montana. Because before that, they had to have 10% of their electricity, and Judith Gap Wind Farm was the only game in town. They had to buy 10% of their electricity from Judith Gap Wind Farm. They bought the hydroelectric plants. Now they have their own source of that 10%, or nowadays 15% of all of renewable energy.
They make the money off that.
And guess what? You drive by Judith Gap, there might be 10 wind turbines out of 97 spinning at any given time, because there is no requirement for them to buy electricity from them. So literally each one of those wind turbines, it costs $5 million to set up.
So they just wasted,
So $500 million in a wind farm that can't sell any electricity because the utility company bought its own renewable energy to offset it.
So government regulation is also probably another big part of it, as well as,
it's huge.
Innovation happening. I guess those two kind of go hand in hand together with the subject.
Exactly.
I didn't even think government, I didn't think that they played that much part in it, but of course this isn't my field.
Well, and you get into weird monopoly laws and what is considered a monopoly.
And that's what I.
And
see, that's what
utilities.
I understand. That's what it sounds like. It's like
Utilities are literally one of the few that are allowed a monopoly. And they do have a huge infrastructure, and you do have to support them so they don't collapse to a certain point. But at the same time, the reason we have monopoly rules are so that corporations don't get in that position where they are sole source and you have no choice.
Yeah, it's not like Berkshire and Hathaway could go and buy one of these energy companies.
Correct.
And then profit off and monopolize through that.
Right.
Because Berkshire and Hathaway isn't an energy company. It's not a utility company. It's
Right.
you know,
And if you look
it's a
at
bunch of
now
companies.
what they're doing, Missoula Electric Co-op just put in a pretty good size, I don't know exactly what size it is, but they put in a solar array. They've got one in Lolo and they've got one in Hamilton. And they're allowed to do that, and they're not restricted to that 50 kilowatts because they are a utility company. Even though they don't own, well now I guess they have their own producing, but before that they didn't have any producing. They just bought on the common market. They bought the electricity to resell to customers. Northwest Energy, if they wanted to take everything out there in target range, buy all that property out there, and just put a field of solar panels all the way from here to Blue Mountain, I don't know how many kilowatts that'd be. It doesn't matter. I mean, you're in megawatts, gigawatts, at that point.
Yeah.
They can do that. If a farmer owned a ranch, and that's not a small ranch, I mean, that's not uncommon. That would not be considered a huge ranch in Montana to own, all of target range. If that farmer wanted to go out and fill that field with solar panels, there's no law saying he can't put up solar panels. He absolutely can do that. He has no market for it. He can't
Selling
connect
it would
them.
be illegal.
Exactly.
Would it technically be illegal?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so it's the selling of the energy, so it puts private investment out too, because if private investors
Correct.
were to try and invest in that, they couldn't sell. That makes a lot of sense.
So if I want to put, and that's the reason you typically see 4 kilowatts, up to about 12 kilowatts is on a really big house, is about the biggest you'll see for private enterprise, for people putting up for their own use.
Musk had his at 4.
There is no reason, because you don't get paid for it, you just get credits. So during the day, I'm making way more electricity on my solar panels than I'm using. At night, I'll get that back when I reuse it based on those credits.
Yeah.
But only to the extent that I can use electricity. I mean, I could put, I guess if I wanted to, I could put, a 49 kilowatt array on my house and just have like giant outdoor floodlights to run, 24/7 just to burn off that extra electricity so that I wasn't giving them free electricity. But the rule right now, as written, is if I'm giving them more electricity than I'm using, that's theirs to do with what they want. It's free. And I cannot sell it to them. So the law is written, and that's anywhere you go. That is not just in solar energy. That is anywhere you go.
In any renewable.
The laws,
source.
well, it's not even, I don't think it's even limited to energy. Anything that you do, that you want to do in life, the rules are written to favor the industry, to favor the corporation.
Rather than people that are using it.
Correct.
Consumers. Yeah, oh yeah. Consumer producer surplus is all that I study right now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's,
all that I'm studying.
those laws are written to
And they're
benefit
written,
them.
Rigidly, and they are written. Yeah.
And there's a reason why we spend billions upon billions of dollars on lobbyists every year.
To figure out
It's
how-
because they figure out how to warp the system, manipulate the system, so you and I can't profit from it, but they can. It is to make the system lopsided and force it towards a monopoly. And every once in a while you'll see something in the news and there's a huge breakup. They've gone after Microsoft for computers way before your time, but early 80s. I remember when they broke up Ma Bell because they said, well, that's a monopoly for telephones, and now AT&T is way bigger than Ma Bell ever was. But, they broke it. So occasionally you do see it. But that's not typically because the monopoly is too powerful. It's because somebody didn't get their cut of it.
somebody
And they
got
go
screwed
after them.
and
Yeah, somebody got screwed and they're like, I'm not getting my money, so guess what, we're shutting you
We're gonna
down.
shut you down. By the way,
So-
what's your name again? I have to.
Tim Chester. So yeah, there's a whole lot going on out there, and
I was gonna say, you guys haven't gotten, this is perfect because I just pretty much have my entire research paper written, especially with these sources.
Who's your instructor?
Jordan Chestnut, she's a poetry graduate student.
Well, now you've got to take all this and write it in poetry, you realize, right? You've got to get megajoules writing with, what is a megajoule?
Would you mind emailing me the copy that you have recorded?
oh yeah, this is still running on, I haven't
Yeah.
shut this down yet.
I was gonna say, I was able to.
Oh, cool, yeah.
I was able to get